This right here shows off the fantastic influence red wine can have on whiskey. Let me tell you about it in this week's review. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, I'm the Whiskey Nerd, and like I said, this is a great example of the influence red wine can have on a whiskey. It is a collaboration between Teeling whiskey and Irish Malts. So let me get it into the glass and I'll tell you a bit more about it. Now first off, I will say, Irish Malts, they were very kind and generous, and they did send me this bottle to do a review because they have a great collaboration with the fantastic Teeling whiskey distillery in Dublin. So Irish Malts, if you're not familiar with them, they're a website here in Ireland and they will sell whiskey. Now they didn't ask me to do a promo for them, but they are a very good resource for getting Irish whiskey. If you're based anywhere around the world where they can ship whiskey to you, they will ship it to you. So on here on the channel, on Instagram, when people ask me how do I get some of those harder to find Irish whiskies at like a more reasonable price, I often send them to Irish Malts, because sometimes if you're in America and you're getting something like a Blue Spot or something like that, when it gets imported they add on prices, but Irish Malts, it's going to be pretty close to the recommended retail price once you get it delivered to you. So big shout out to them for giving me the bottle, but I do use their site a lot, so I was very happy to get it. And what is this whiskey? So for a while now, Irish Malts have been doing a few collaborations with different distilleries, and this is no different. This is their collaboration with the Teeling whiskey distillery here in Dublin. Their head kind of taster at Irish Malts, Lavinia, she went to the Teeling distillery, to their warehouse, and she tried out a few of the casks they've got maturing. She settled on this one right here, which is a great little example. It is a single pot still Irish whiskey. Now, if you're not familiar, single pot still is the kind of style of whiskey that's unique to Ireland. You can only make it in Ireland. It uses malted barley, unmalted barley, and distillers can add a small amount of other grains in there. So it has a bit of a space in the mash bill for people to play around with and get the flavor that they want. For Teeling, what they do is go straight down the middle. 50% malted barley, 50% unmalted barley. The malted barley gives you caramel, biscuit, that kind of malty note, whereas the unmalted barley gives you kind of oily texture, peppery, and more of a bright flavor. So mixing those two together, you get a really great whiskey. But that's not all they did to this whiskey, because this whiskey spent its entire life in Bordeaux red wine cask. Now, they don't give an age statement to it, but based on the alcohol percentage of it, which is 59.9%, I'm guessing that it's around 5, maybe 6 years old, because Teeling spirit goes into the cask. I remember them saying at about 65%. So it's probably about in the 5-year-old mark, but it is a non-age statement whiskey. And I'll repeat that strength for you. It is 59.9% alcohol, so just shy of 60% alcohol, or 120 proof. So it is very, very full flavored, but with that red wine influence, it's kind of tamped it down and made it just a bit sweeter and softer. It's a single cask whiskey, and if I recall correctly, there's less than 300 bottles of this kind of batch. So I think there was 288 bottles they got from the cask. So it's not the biggest release in the world, but it is a very full flavored release. So I think that's enough talking. Let's go in for the nose. Cheers. Okay, right off the bat, the red wine influence is jumping out of the glass. Like it is, you would never imagine this to be a red wine, obviously, because it's got a core whiskey flavor in there, but you get those oak tannins from the red wine. You get the kind of dark cherries, get blackberries, a little bit of like something maybe like lighter fruits, maybe like something like a strawberry or a raspberry, but it's just heavy on those dark fruits. There's really, really rich black cherries, a little bit of plums, maybe those really, if you are familiar with a Bordeaux red wine, it's kind of like a meaty, heavy red wine. Spends some time in oak casks, so it picks up the kind of oak char, but also the tannins, and brings up a lot of flavors there. And that's all sitting on top of like a really rich core of whiskey. Like there's caramel, kind of like almost salted caramel note coming through here. Really rich. Like I said, the 50% malted barley in the mash bill is going to give you those kind of caramelly, biscuity notes. And then a little bit of like the spicy, peppery, almost like a, not quite like a black pepper, but a little bit of almost white pepper coming through as well from that whiskey. But again, the red wine influence is the star of the show. I mean, it spent its entire life in those red wine casks, so I'd expect the red wine to have a really strong upfront. And then And the background getting a little bit of like vanilla, not like the sugary vanilla you get with like an ex-bourbon cask. If you're familiar with Irish whiskey where it has that sweet butterscotch, like toffee vanilla up front, this is more almost like a natural vanilla bean, vanilla paste, like those, like the vanilla beans you get. So there's a bit of vanilla there, but it is sitting underneath that whiskey, which is sitting underneath that red wine influence. So let's go in for the palate and see if it stays as interesting. Cheers. It's spicy, it's sweet, it's fruity. You get a big hit of like ginger spice, cinnamon, black pepper actually there as I'm talking. But then right behind that peppery spice, it's like figs, stewed plums, like really into those heavier, almost like syrupy sweet notes. And then you get more like almost baking spices. You get a little bit of like cinnamon, maybe a clove, maybe a nutmeg. And then also you are getting a lot of the ABV. Like it's not hot, like I was able to sip it there, taste it fine, no coughing, no nothing. 120 proof, that's a good sign because it means that it's kind of balanced out a lot. The red wine influence definitely kind of tamed those harsher, stronger alcohol notes and lets you taste the red wine influence from the cask as well as the flavor from the whiskey. As I'm talking, a little bit almost like creamier as well through the mid palate. Like the bit of vanilla I was getting on the end of the nose is probably stronger here. So I'm gonna go in for a second sip, let's chew it around, see what I can feel, see what I can taste. Cheers. Yeah, second sip around, a lot creamier, a lot like that oily texture you get from pot still whiskey. It spreads out and that gives it this kind of like almost creamy mouthfeel, that salted caramel note I was getting in the nose, almost more like a sweeter caramel here on the palate, bit of vanilla. That air is all riding underneath, like I was saying, those spices. The black pepper, it's like I actually crunched almost onto a black peppercorn, quite tingly on the tongue. That's the ABV mixing with the influence of the pot still, as well as that red wine influence. Like I'm talking about the other side of the whiskey, but the red wine influence is huge. It's not hidden at all. There is so much of those stewed dark fruits. There's the tannins from the oak. Like it almost feels a little dry. It almost feels like I've tasted a really, really rich red wine and then taken a breath or two. Like you get that little aftertaste of the red wine. Like that's, I know, going into the finish, but it is really, really strong influence of the red wine here, which is exactly what they were going for. I mean, they aged entirely red wine. You'd expect to taste red wine, but as I was talking about the finish there, I'm going to go in for another sip, focus on the finish and see how it tastes. Cheers. Okay, so on the finish, up front on the palate, you get your fruit, you get your spice, you get your bit of sweetness leveling out into the middle, you get the hit of the ABV, but onto the finish, as you sip it, as you breathe, the sweetness does kind of fade off. Like it's not sharp or harsh or like kind of like that tired oak note you can get sometimes. It's just the sweetness fades off and leaves you with like the berry influence of the red wine, still getting that black pepper, still as I'm breathing, as I'm talking, I'm getting that black peppercorn, rich spicy note there, as well as a little bit almost like a little bit of like anise, like that star anise kind of flavor here, that anise seed. You get that there going through into the finish, as well as I'm breathing, a little bit of like dark cocoa. I wouldn't say really bitter, heavy duty dark cocoa, but I'd say more like that, almost like a creamy, maybe 60% chocolate dark cocoa, where you get that it's going towards a dark chocolate, but it's not fully dark. It still has that bit of creaminess, bit of sweetness there, and yeah, still more dried berries, actually a lot of dried berries on the finish. That kind of, as if I've eaten a bit of chocolate which had some dried berries, you know, those freeze dried berries in it. That kind of flavor is lingering on, but that finish it's going. It is still going and is evolving a little. Like it went from the red wine influence, the cask influence, and now into almost dried berries. So it is lasting a very long time, as you'd expect for 59.9% alcohol. As I said, this is a single cask release from Irish Malts. You can get it on their website. I'll pop a link to it down below. It might sell out pretty quickly because it is a very nice whiskey. I know they did give it to me for free, but I'm not just saying that for lying about it. It is a very nice whiskey. I would imagine this might sell out pretty quickly, but then hopefully Irish Malts will buy some more like it, or Teeling themselves will release some more like it. So if you do like the sound of it but you're unable to get it, keep an eye out, and there's something like this will come down the line, because that's a really nice whiskey. I'm really glad I got this. If I wasn't given this bottle for free and I was tasted a sample of it, I would probably have bought a bottle of this. This is really, really nice. So very, again, shout out to them for giving it to me. If you like a red wine, if you like red wine influence on whiskey, you would probably really, really love this. So if you are a fan of red wines, I'd say definitely pick this up. If you're a fan of good whiskey, I'd say definitely pick this up. It's a very nice, kind of different style of whiskey than the ones I've been trying recently, with that entirely aged in the red wine cask. Have you tried any whiskies aged in red wine? Let me know down in the comments below if you think red wine casks can add to a whiskey, or if you think sometimes they can overpower. If you have tried any other whiskies from Teeling and you're single casks, let me know what your favorite was. I put out whiskey reviews every Wednesday, and I put out cocktail recipes featuring whiskey, and I'll put out a cocktail recipe featuring this whiskey every Friday. So if you want to see more like that, make sure you hit subscribe, hit that thumbs up. Let me know if there are any other kind of whiskies you'd like to see me review in the future, and I will see you next time. Sláinte.